my first command and I'm already behind enemy lines in what has to be the worst detail a captain can get, scouting. I had no experience in scouting. Before I made captain, I had served aboard the USS Needhog, which hardly ever does anything. And before that, I had station duty. I hadn't seen any sort of action, let alone action behind enemy lines. The worst part was that the assignment was to the ship. I got dragged along for the ride because someone in charge decided it would be funny to have Captain Neal command the USS Armstrong. Thanks to our last name, everyone in our family was familiar with the first man on the moon. When I had first got the orders, I cringed when I saw the ship's name. Thankfully, the crew is competent and the Armstrong is rigged for the job. We have several types of sensors that allow us to get a fairly detailed view on a system without having to be anywhere near it. Our orders are to exit warp in dark space, scan a system, and move on unless we see something that requires further investigation. We've effectively censused 18 systems in the 2 days we've been at it. The stress of the assignment had begun to get to me. 4 out of the 18 had the Omni-Union ships we'd heard about, and 2 of those had weird warp fluctuations that would have ripped us to shreds if we had jumped into the system. Thankfully, we were far enough away that they didn't detect us. Or if they did, they decided not to do anything about it. "Bubkiss in this one too, Captain," Lieutenant Lee said. "We'll hopefully see that a lot," I replied. "Well, I, for one, am hoping we find something exciting soon." Lee grinned at me. I grabbed the bridge of my nose to demonstrate my exasperation. "Lieutenant Lee, our task is to map out the enemy territory to the best of our ability. It's not to go sightseeing. If we see something interesting, that's probably going to be a bad thing." "Yes, sir," she replied in a playfully dejected way. I knew that Lee knew why we were out here and how important the mission was. I also knew that Lee could tell how stressed I was about being able to perform said mission, which is why she was being playful. If she could tell, so could other members of the bridge crew. Her playful banter was a way of cheering me up and warning me that my mask of authority was slipping. I double-checked the findings and saw nothing. "Bubkiss it is," I said. "All right, on to the next system." I watched the slight increase in activity amongst my crew as they prepared the warp. Omega had given us specific systems to check based on the incoming trajectory of the fleet that had attacked Sol, so there weren't a lot of calculations to do. I didn't really know what to think of Omega. I was fairly familiar with him because he interacts with the Nidhogg a lot. Every time we had a conversation, he had appeared as a grim reaper, a very old personification of mortality. Honestly, it was in bad taste. He doesn't have a body, and as far as I know, he can't die. It almost seemed like a taunt, but I got the feeling that he just thought it was cool. Or maybe it's symbolism because he was designed to take out the other AI when they went rogue. I guess it could be because he's their personification of death. Still, he probably just does it because he thinks it looks cool. A slight lurch from the ship as we exited warp at our destination brought me back to reality. I watched as our scanners examined the system in question. 4 planets, a yellow sun, and a bunch of wreckage. Several debris fields worth. One of the planets was in the habitable zone and appeared as if it had vegetation. I took another look at the debris fields. "What the hell?" I asked no one in particular. "Sir," began Lieutenant Junior Grade Flowers, "we have several debris fields and a planet that has signs of civilization. We've also got warp fluctuations, but they're weird." "Weird how?" "There are a bunch of them." "As if there are a lot of different sources," he responded. 18. No, 19 total. "Well, that would suggest that the enemy's amassing here," I said as I sat forward. Lee looked at me. "No enemy contacts. No ships at all except for the broken-up ones in the debris fields. I think we're looking at the remnants of a fight." I looked back at the readings. She was right. There wasn't a single functioning ship in the space of this system. There weren't even any signs of functional satellites or stations. For a moment I wondered about cloaking technology, but then I thought better of it. We've got every type of scanner. You can do a lot of things to look invisible to a lot of different scanners, but you can't do all of them at once. We've tried. It was Flowers' turn to look at me. "Sir, I suggest we get a closer look. I can't quite pinpoint what is causing the warp fluctuations. If we could get scans of it, it could prove invaluable. Plus, we've been told to try to get detailed scans of any inhabited planets we come across, just in case it's their homeworld, if they even have one. I frowned slightly. Take us in as far as we need to go. Don't answer any hails and stay away from the debris fields. I've heard they might have nasty surprises. Lee had received the same briefing I had and grimaced. Nuclear and antimatter mines were nasty. Our shields should be able to withstand a few, but any more than that and we would be dead. There would be no rescue. Our calls for aid would take a long time to reach U.S. space, and they likely wouldn't be willing to send a team. Whatever situation we reported could have changed drastically, and we're in enemy territory. I looked around and saw the grim faces of a bridge crew who had realized the same thing. We approached the system on thrust. As we got nearer, we could make out that the debris were from multiple ships of multiple types. It looked more and more like Lieutenant Lee was right about there having been a fight. There were also bits of stray ordnance and the traps that we had been warned about. "Sir, I've reconstructed a cruiser and it matches the OU ship profile," Flowers said. "Good work. Definitely avoid the debris fields," I ordered. I waited and waited as our ship grew closer and closer. I watched as we first entered the warp fluctuations, then the system itself. "Okay, that should be close enough, Flowers," I said. "Let's see what we can see and get out of here." We were now close enough to pick up bodies on the sensors. No emissions of any kind, all dead, floating aimlessly in space. I turned my attention to the scans of the planet. We were close enough for a visual, but I wish we weren't. Destruction was everywhere. Buildings were burned out and blown to pieces. Corpses, both organic and robotic, littered the streets. Or rather, what was left of the streets. It had been a long time since the U.S. had performed orbital bombardments, but we had seen them in training. I recognized these scenes as the aftermath. My eyes widened as I realized that it was the same no matter where I looked. Cities, towns, fields, stretches of wilderness. The orbital bombardment had been indiscriminate. The bastards had surrounded the planet and bombed it to oblivion. I zoomed in on part of a city to get a better look at the dead. That was a mistake. The organics were humanoid, with tentacles on their faces. Rot had only just begun to set in, confirming that this had happened somewhat recently. Men, women, and children were strewn across the landscape. Most were missing portions of their bodies or were scattered everywhere. I stopped on one that was intact with its eyes open. They were jet black. I wondered if they were like that when they were alive. Then I noticed that the alien I was looking at hadn't died from the orbital bombardment. It was still relatively in one piece, and its wound looked like one from an energy weapon. Lying next to it was what appeared to be a rifle of some sort. I panned over to one of the robots. It was lying face down, and next to it was a different type of rifle. They had been fighting each other? The orbital bombardment must have been preceded by an invasion. But then, where are the winners? I was baffled until a horrible thought occurred to me. Xenocide. The bombardment and invasion had been to exterminate, not to conquer. I couldn't help but express my horror with a small sound. I looked up and realized that everyone else was looking at the same thing and coming to the same conclusion. A war of extinction. Something that had been avoided at all cost in our history. We had even forgiven the baby eaters, the Daluran, to avoid having one over our heads. This was the horror we had avoided. How can something live with itself knowing that it's done this? I felt myself involuntarily gag as I realized that my ancestors very nearly did something as atrocious as what I was looking at. I felt an immense shame as I realized that I might be related to something that said yes during the Daluran vote. Even the children? What kind of sick, demented fuckwit would ever think that this was okay? That it was justified? Only comfy, cozy, fat fuck politicians who never bled a day in their life would be okay with this. That and sick fucks who need an entire team of therapists to even hope to be normal. I saved the data. When we got back, I would make sure Omega got this. I'll beg him to never let us do this. I'll give anything to be able to be certain that we never turn into the lowly creatures that would kill children just for the sake of winning a war. I felt a tear roll down my cheek, and a sniff from the bridge crew reminded me where I was. I wiped my tear and looked up. We all know what we're seeing here. We know it in our hearts, and our hearts are screaming at us that it's wrong, and it is. Those that did this will be punished, We will punish them with all of our might, and we will make them regret this. Even if they can't regret now, we will teach them. I slammed my clenched fist into my armrest. We will pound it into them. I stood up. We nearly did this to the Deluran, but even back then, more than half of us knew it was wrong. We will save this data and return it to the United Systems. The near half of us that voted yes will see what it is they were voting for. Until then, back to work. Flowers, have you turned up anything? Yes, sir. The warp fluctuations are coming from machinery, he responded, wiping his face. I sat back down. Any idea how it works? No, I'm not an engineer, sir, but I've scanned it thoroughly enough that we should be able to extrapolate schematics. Sir, Lee interrupted, what about Earth? My blood ran cold. The current population of Earth was 312 billion. They wouldn't go down without a fight, but that many people? We'll give them the best chance we can. I want detailed scans of everything. Extrapolate enemy ship profiles and armament, I said as I looked back at the screen. We will do everything in our power to make sure this doesn't happen again. Sir, by the time a message with this much data reaches Sol, the assault will likely have taken place. The only way we'll be able to get this intel back to them would be to abandon our current mission and return to Sol with the data, Flowers said. I looked at our list of systems. 4 left. If we had more left than that, I would say to abandon the mission and return to Sol with haste. But 4 will only take a few more hours if we're fast about it. Technically, we were supposed to continue scouting based on our own readings after we finished with these systems. I think Command will forgive us, though. There's no way they're expecting the enemy to be xenocidal. They're probably thinking that the system will be occupied by enemy forces, and the occupants will be enslaved until we take the system back. Hell, they might chew me out for finishing the mandatory part of the mission. That's what I'll hope for, at least. Okay, we'll finish the census and make speed back to Seoul. How are the readings coming along? I asked. We'll have them done momentarily, should we... Flowers paused for a moment. Should we do something about the planet? There's nothing we can do, I said with grim finality. We can't accept any hails, and if we start hailing and the enemy is still down there, we're compromised. If there are any survivors, at least they're on their home planet. Air to breathe and food to eat. There's not much more we can do for them than that. Aye, sir, Flowers said. I turned back to the images of the planet's surface. I had been nervous about fighting the enemy before, scared even. Now I can't imagine anything I want more than to eradicate them from our universe. The rage that welled up inside me quickly overtook the sadness and horror I had been feeling. The only thing that pissed me off more than what they'd done was that I couldn't make them suffer for what they'd done. I ran a quick tally simulation on the data from the planet. The estimate came to 32 billion. Damn, anything over 20 billion is usually a homeworld for a spacefaring species. I silently hoped they had colonies out there somewhere, but doubted it. Humanity hadn't begun extra-system colonization until we had hit around 50 billion people on Earth. By then, we had multiple habitats on Mars, Titan, and Luna as well. The Knuknus and the Gaunt had followed a similar path. The Alumari were an outlier because they were insectoid. I double-checked our scans. There were no other signs of habitation in this system. It was extremely unlikely that these people had extra-system colonies, because they didn't even have intersystem colonies. I turned my attention to our extrapolations of their ship schematics. They had been fairly advanced, too. The enemy fleet must have been massive. Captain, we've finished the scans of the wreckage. We're good to go, sir, Lee said. Roger, let's move on then. Next system as fast as we can manage, I ordered. The next system contained nothing of note. The one after that contained a small fleet of OU vessels and a few uninhabited planets. They didn't notice us. The third system contained a larger fleet, but still no inhabited planets. We double-checked to make sure that there weren't any ships that didn't match what we had scanned. There weren't, so we moved on to the fourth and final system. As the ship jostled slightly from the exit of warp, I felt that something was wrong. I don't know if I had caught a glimpse of the scanners out of the corner of my eye, or if it was some sort of sixth sense. Maybe I had felt the tension that suddenly emanated from the crew that was monitoring the sensors. What is it? I asked urgently. Sir, there's an absolutely massive amount of OU ships in this system, and 2, no, 5 planets with signs of habitation, Flowers said with a hint of fear in his voice. Do they see us? Flowers was silent for a few moments. Lieutenant Junior Grade Flowers, do they see us? I asked louder. No, sir, they don't appear to have noticed our presence, he finally answered. Good. Let's get what we need and go to Sol. Quickly, people, I ordered. The crew set about their tasks with gusto. We got profiles for each ship. There were around 3,500 ships. We compared the profiles to what we had on record. They had battleships, cruisers, frigates, destroyers, and corvettes. The corvettes that matched our profiles were the warp disruptor ships. They were inactive. The ones that didn't match the profiles looked like lightly armed shuttles. Light transport ships, most likely. There was only one of the big types that didn't match our profiles. It also didn't seem to match the designs of their other ships very much. It looked fatter than the other ships. Bloated, even. As if one of their battleships were in the final stages of a pregnancy. Kind of like when you compare our battleship ships to our carriers, I said. I think so too, sir. There are 10 of them, Lee said. What about the planets? I asked. We can't get close enough for a detailed scan, but there are extensive signs of habitation on 5 of them. 3 out of the 5 would not suit organic life, Flowers responded. What does that mean? Well, sir, one of the planets is extremely toxic, another doesn't have a readable atmosphere. The third is a frozen planet that has parts of it reaching true zero. Also, the OU are not attacking these habitats, Flowers said. So it's likely the robots are responsible for the habitats? I asked with amazement. Yes, sir, but we're not able to get a definite read on the structures, Flowers said. Also, there appear to be space stations that are manufacturing new ships. I'm counting 12. This was huge. 5 colonized planets that the machines weren't attacking, a fleet of 3,500 ships, and on top of all that, shipyards. Even if this isn't their home system, destroying it will definitely set them back. It was unlikely they would let it go without a fight, though. I remembered the briefing. 250 million enemy ships. If they all converged here, we would need to use the Dreadnought. The Marines aren't going to be happy that they won't get to put boots on the ground. All right, everyone, finish up the intel gathering, I said. Let's get back to Sol. The diplomat's ship arrived a while ago, you know, Luna said. Well, it wouldn't be the government if we weren't kept waiting, Kryn replied. We had been waiting 3 days for the diplomat to arrive. It was a nervous wait for me because the last thing I ever wanted to be was a diplomat. It's far too complicated, trying to appease all of the different cultures of all of the different species while simultaneously trying to milk them for all they're worth. Seems like a lot more work than being shot at and shooting back. I could barely keep track of who was angry at who and why on my own crew, let alone the entire galaxy. And now we're dealing with what someone could easily mistake as an alliance of warrior races. I sincerely hoped that they had sent someone extremely competent. Director 3 seemed pretty reasonable, but we shouldn't press our luck. Most of my crew had taken the shore leave that Station Master Nixt had offered, but Kryn, Luna, and I remained aboard the Loalana. I was far too nervous to have any fun, and my bridge officers had decided that I needed company. Kron was still in medbay, relearning his motor skills. It was coming along nicely, and he should be able to return to duty any day now. I wondered who I should make my new second, or if one would simply be assigned to me. Shiphead Yulina, the diplomat is here and waiting for you. Come meet us in my office, please, Station Master Nixt said over the comm. Understood, on my way, I replied. I shrugged at Kryn and Luna. They returned the gesture. I got up and started to exit the ship. Along the way, I passed the engineering team that was handling the repairs. They had had to order parts for the FTLD, which had arrived before the diplomat. Now they were working feverishly to complete the repairs. They assured me that they would be done by the end of the day today, and I was inclined to believe them. I passed a few of my crew on the way to Nixt's office, giving them a wave which they returned. I had written the letters to the families informing them of the passing of their loved ones, and our dead had been sent off. I found myself hoping that they had found some peace as I knocked on the door to the station master's office. Come in. Nick's muffled voice came through the door. I entered and saw Nick sitting in his chair. and Urakari in the diplomatic corps uniform was sitting across from him. As they turned, my jaw nearly dropped off my face in shock. "Hey, Yulina. Long time no see," Uluni said. My mother had written me a while ago letting me know that my sister had become a politician. I had thought at the time that she had meant that Uluni had become a mayor of some colony city. The diplomatic corps was a very high-ranking position in a politician's career, and most diplomats eventually become senators. I was very surprised to see that my sister had become an ambassador so quickly. I cursed myself for not writing my mother more often. "Hi, Uluni. This is a surprise," I said after swallowing a couple of times. "I can tell," she laughed. "I haven't seen you in, 13, 14 years? "Yeah, since I entered officer school," I said. Nobody would be able to tell we were siblings at a glance. My scales were brown and green, and hers were purple and blue. I was a good 4 inches taller than her, and she was far thinner than I. The only way that you could tell without being told is the Ul family syllable in our names. But even then you'd assume we were cousins, not siblings born 2 days apart from one another. I was older, of course. "So tell me about the aliens. How's their temperament?" she asked in a professional manner while simultaneously maintaining her joyful demeanor. "Creepy." "Right, yeah, they are friendly enough. My crew and I would be dead without their help. They fed us, treated our injured, and even repaired the majority of the damage to our ship." "Wait, did they scan our tech?" she asked with alarm. "No, they intentionally left our faster-than-light drive in its damaged state to avoid doing exactly that. Not that learning about our FTLD would have helped them much," I said with a shrug. "Right, says here they're more advanced than we are." More advanced is an understatement. They are able to precision warp in-system during a ship-to-ship battle. Our FTLD would have gone critical if we had even so much as tried that, I said, gesturing for emphasis. And their weapons are eons ahead of ours as well. They were very clear that they want us to know that they do not want a fight, and a fight would be very bad for us. "Okay, well, if they don't want a fight, then what do they want from us?" she asked. "I don't know for certain, that's why you're here," I said with a bit of sarcasm. Nixt laughed a little. "Indeed. They've been waiting for 3 days. We really should get things moving, Ambassador Uluni. Are you ready for contact?" My sister sighed. "As ready as I'll ever be." Nixt hit a button on his desk, and we all waited in silence for the Thanatos to answer the hail. "This is Captain Reynolds of the USSS Thanatos. How can I help you, Station Master?" "Hello, Captain Reynolds. Our diplomat, Ambassador Uluni, has arrived. We're ready for the first contact meeting whenever you are," Nixt responded. "Excellent. I'll let Director 3 know and he'll get back to you in a little bit. Ambassador Uluni, huh? Are they related to shiphead Yulina by any chance?" Reynolds said with a chuckle implying that he was joking. Nixt held up his mandibles in a smile. "Yes, actually, she's his sister. And we're both sitting right here, Captain Reynolds," I warned him. I hadn't got a chance to know Reynolds all that much, but humans seemed to have a crass sense of humor at the most inappropriate of times. Also a keen sense of perception. Hello, shiphead. Hope you're doing well. How's the repairs coming along?" "They're nearly finished. The engineers told me they'd be done by the end of the day." "Good to hear. Anyways, Director 3 just messaged me saying he's ready to take over the call. I'm going to transfer you now," Reynolds said. A ping came from the comm indicating a new call had connected. "This is Director 3 of the United Systems," came the distorted voice of the man in armor. "Hello, Director 3. This is Station Master Nixt. Our diplomat has arrived. You'll be meeting with shiphead Yulina and Ambassador Uluni," Nixt explained. "Understood. Can we meet aboard the station?" Interrupted Uluni. "We wouldn't typically want to meet on something that is armed. This station has defensive weaponry." "I'm aware," said Director 3. "The weaponry aboard the station consists of 450mm chain guns and 2 guided missile launchers. Correct?" All 3 of us looked at each other with wide eyes. Then Uluni and I looked at Station Master Nixt questioningly. "Yes," he replied. "That's correct." "Then that will work for us. Not to offend you, but such light armaments are not a concern to us." Uluni turned to me and mouthed, Light armaments? I nodded emphatically. Nixt looked at Uluni cautiously. I personally have no problem welcoming aboard a small party for the meeting if that's all right with the ambassador. Yes, if you insist, then that will be fine, she said. Excellent, Director 3 said. I will be accompanied by Captain Hao Yu Wang, who is the commanding officer of the rescue team, and Lieutenant Sergei Babinin, who made face-to-face first contact. I assume you will keep a record of our meeting? Yes, and we will gladly offer you a copy as well, Uluni said. That won't be necessary. The reason I want to meet aboard the station that your ships cannot support our software. I've been assured that the station can. Would it be okay if one of our programs were to record our meeting? He meant one of the AI. Uluni looked at me quizzically. I saw a chance for a prank on my sister. Knowing the humans, it would amuse them as well. What kind of big brother would I be if I didn't take this chance? That should be fine, I said to her. Okay, she said. A guide will meet you at the airlock and we will see you in a conference room, Director 3. Understood. Out. I wondered which AI they would be bringing along. I kind of hoped it would be Tim, because Omega seemed a bit too serious. Tim would at least keep the mood lively. I was suddenly thankful that Tim had been my introduction to AI. I felt a slight stab of pity for my soon-to-be shocked sister. When I remembered the massive difference in our pay, it faded pretty quickly. My sister and I went to the conference room. On the way, she was chatting about how lucky she felt to be a part of all of this, and how she missed her new house. Yeah, pity definitely gone. No regrets. She was yammering on about how beautiful Senate City is when a knock came at the door. Blenus opened it and escorted Director 3, Captain Wang, and Lieutenant Babinin into the room. The captain and the lieutenant were wearing their uniforms, and Director 3 was wearing his armor. They each took their seats. Thank you for allowing us aboard your station. I am Director 3 of the United Systems. I will be our lead ambassador for this first contact. This is Captain Wang and Lieutenant Babinin. He gestured to each. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us. I am Ambassador Uluni, and this is Shiphead Ulina, whom you have met. I would like to extend the Republic's warmest welcome and deepest thanks for saving his life, Uluni said. It's a pleasure to help, Director 3 said with a slow nod. We return your warm greetings in kind, and wish you to know that we come with peace in mind. Are you able to ratify a formal agreement? My hearts began to beat a bit faster. We are already treading into unfamiliar territory for me. I genuinely don't know if Uluni has that ability. Can a diplomat make a treaty? She smiled politely and said, I have the authority to negotiate an agreement, but such an agreement will have to be ratified by our administration, specifically the executive. Interesting. An interspecies democratic republic? You'll have to tell me more. But first, there are things we must ask of you if you don't mind getting straight to business, Director 3 said. Uluni looked at me as if to ask if this was normal. I shrugged. Certainly, she said as she looked back to the black-armored man across the table. Thank you. First, I would like to get your consent to have this conversation recorded, Director 3 said. Heh, here it comes. Yes, of course. Such a historic moment certainly deserves to be preserved with as much accuracy as possible. We are already recording in case you weren't aware. Honestly, I had assumed you already were, Uluni said with a laugh. I don't think that's what he means, Madam Ambassador, I said with a slight grin. I'm pretty sure he's about to ask if it's okay if Omega or Tim come aboard the station. Uluni gave me a look that translated roughly to who the hell are they, to which I responded with a look that meant, you should have read your fucking briefing. Just Omega would be fine. I'm sorry, Madam Ambassador, were you not informed of our AI? Director 3 said as we were glaring at each other. Her glare turned into wide eyes as his question hit home. No, sorry, I wasn't. Your AI, as in artificial intelligence? She asked. Sorry, Director 3, do you mind if I confer with our diplomat for a brief moment? I asked before she could make a fool of herself. Certainly, we'll wait here, he said politely. I stood and gestured for Uluni to exit the room into the hallway. She got up and I followed her out of the room. As soon as the door closed behind me, she spun around. "What the fuck?" she asked. "That's my line," I said. "Why didn't you read your damned briefing?" "I skimmed it. This is my first contact," she yelled. "I had to study the fucking protocols, but what the fuck do you mean they have AI?" "Well, if you had read your fucking briefing, you would know that these guys are so advanced, they don't even consider the OU to be artificial intelligence," I yelled back. "And after meeting 2 of their AIs, I don't either." She looked at me with a mixture of shock and incredulity. I gave her a similar look back because I was stunned that she had come to this so unprepared, but a little part of me was kind of happy that she was still the same sister that I grew up with. She never was good at homework. "Okay, listen. The Omni Union are comprised of programs that these guys call virtual intelligences, or VI for short. Do not ask one of the AI what the difference is if you don't want to get compared to a lizard," I said quickly. "You should give permission for one of the AI to board. We don't have a way to prevent it anyway. You'll understand if you get the chance to talk to it." "Their AI can fucking talk?" she asked. "Yes, and frankly, they have a tough time shutting up. At least in my experience," I said. "Anyways, they wouldn't ask if they didn't have a good reason for it, and as far as I can tell, they aren't malicious. They have their own laws regarding first contact, and their AI follow them to the letter. It's why they didn't fix the Loalana's FTLD." "Yeah, but how do you know they aren't malicious? What if this is some sort of trick?" she asked. "Why would they need to trick us? They could destroy this entire station in no time at all," I said, knowing full well that she had seen the USS Thanatos. She remained silent and avoided eye contact for a few moments. Then she begrudgingly murmured an agreement, and we went back into the room. "My apologies, Director 3. We were in such a rush that some materials must have been left out of the briefing. Ambassador Uluni is up to speed now," I said with a smile. I could tell that Lieutenant Babinin was trying very hard not to smile. "That's all right," Director 3 said. "My apologies as well," Uluni said. "You may bring one of your AI aboard the station to record our meeting." "Thank you," he said. He held up his hand for a moment while he looked like he was silently speaking to someone. Then he put his hand back down and said, "Allow me to introduce you to Omega." "Greetings," said Omega from the intercom. After a moment of shock, Uluni said, "Hello, Omega. I am Ambassador Uluni of the Republic." I looked around for his hologram and was surprised that it didn't appear. Uluni looked at me curiously, trying to figure out what I was doing. "Shiphead Ulina, this station doesn't have sufficient holographic emitters for me to project my avatar into this room," Omega said in a somewhat patronizing tone. "Oh, right. Understood," I replied sheepishly. Director 3 cleared his throat. "Now that that's settled, let's begin." "Yes, you said something about a treaty?" Uluni said. "Correct. We would like the assistance of the Republic in defending the system of Sol from Omni Union attack." Shit. I could feel Uluni glance at me quizzically. I was very careful to keep my expression neutral and not betray how much I had bent us over for this particular request. Director 3 continued. "We have enough firepower to keep them at bay for now, but we do not have enough ships on hand for a full defense if they attack in earnest." That was probably a lie, but on the other hand, the United System sounded like it had a lot of other things on its plate. For all I knew, they were facing down a different war on the other side of their space or something. "I'm certain something can be arranged," Uluni said cautiously. "How long have you been at war with the Omni Union?" "Since shiphead Ulina Blind jumped into Sol with them hot on his tail," Lieutenant Babinin said. "They attacked us on sight while we were trying to evacuate the crew of the RSV Loalana." I kept my neutral expression as I felt Uluni look back at me with a different kind of glare, one that made me feel lucky that we were in front of guests. Now she knew that we could not say no to this request, because we had dragged them into this war to begin with. Or rather, I had. Even so, for diplomatic relations between the United Systems and the Republic to continue, she would have to negotiate a defensive pact, and the executive would have to sign it. And if he didn't sign it, then he wouldn't get elected next term once word got out. I really hoped that I wouldn't catch too much flack for this. I had been following protocol, and it's not as if it were intentional. I told myself that I'd be fine and calm down. Okay, I understand now. Just a moment. Uluni pulled a communicator from her pocket and I watched as she dialed Station Master Nixt. Station Master, could you please save a copy of the first contact so far and forward it to the address I'm sending you? Ask them to muster as many ships as we can and to prepare to jump to coordinates that will follow soon. Doing so now, Nixt said. Thank you. She hung up the comm. So, before we can formalize any type of treaty, I'd like to know a bit more about your people, specifically your use of artificial intelligence. Please feel free to direct any questions about AI to Omega. Director 3 gestured to a speaker. Right. Hello again? Omega, Uluni began. Are you a servant of the United Systems? Yes, but not by force. I am under contract to work with the military and the government of the United Systems. I am paid for my services and free to not renew my contract if I so choose, Omega said. I can even buy out my contract if I want to end it early. You get paid? Uluni asked with a bit of shock in her voice. Yes, slavery of any type is unlawful in the United Systems. I actually get paid more than Director 3, Omega replied with a bit of smugness. Director 3 cleared his throat. Actually, you get paid more than Captain Wong, Lieutenant Babinin, and myself put together. But you also work more than all three of us put together. Uluni seemed to be having a bit of trouble conceptualizing this. She took a few moments to gather her thoughts. Have you ever been to war against the United Systems? She finally asked. I have not, Omega said. But other AI have. The matter was resolved amicably, and I won't answer any further questions on the subject. I'm sure we will share more of our history once diplomatic relations are further established. That's fair. Okay, final question. What makes you think the OU are not AI? When we were attacked, the OU managed to take control of one of our ships that happened to be carrying AI Tim. Tim identified the intruders as virtual intelligent programs. Then Tim proceeded to lock out their access and dismantle their code. Once the report was filed, I confirmed Tim's findings, Omega said. To put it simpler, I know they are not AI the same way you know a lizard is not a Urikari. Uluni winced slightly at this explanation. I gave her a look to say I told you so. Then she and Director 3 began to talk about the treaty, or defensive pact, or whatever it should be called. I found myself zoning out, every once in a while catching Captain Wong and Lieutenant Babinin doing the same. I had a good internal chuckle about that. Even beings as mighty as the humans were helpless against bureaucratic bullshit. I found myself wondering if Omega was also zoning out. Are you certain you want us to bring the Loalana back to Sol? Omega asked, satisfying one piece of curiosity and causing another in a single sentence. Yes, I'm sure I can convince his command to consider it a reprimand for dragging you into our war, Uluni said. I opened my mouth to speak, but she continued, This will serve as a demonstration of good faith, as well as allow my brother to keep his command of the Loalana. I suddenly didn't have anything to say that wasn't expletives. I closed my mouth. I looked at the document that was on the table. Apparently, Director 3 was going to remain here with Omega and a few Marines to continue diplomatic talks. The Thanatos and Loalana were going to head back to Sol to rejoin the defense. Once the Republic was able to muster a fleet, they would go to Sol to help out. Well, at least we weren't going to war with the humans. Shit.